I'm going to talk about my experience going to the JALT PanSIG conference at the end of May. And for those of you who are not familiar, maybe not familiar with it, the PanSIG conference is organized by the larger organization JALT, the Japanese Association for Language Teachers. And within this fairly or very large organization, there are a large number of these special interest groups or SIGs. And besides the main conference, which usually takes place in the fall, the JALT conference, the special interest groups organize their own conference called the PanSIG conference, usually at the end of spring. And it's still focused on language teaching and teaching in general, but the kind of the highlight of it is kind of emphasizing what these special interest groups do. They usually, all of them, put on a forum, and they have tables set up so you can interact with them and learn about what they do. This year, it took place at the end of May at the Fukui University of Technology in Fukui. And the theme this year was revisiting core principles in language learning. There's more information on their website. Now, this was the picture on the PanSIG website, and this is Fukui Station. They recently had a Shinkansen station open in, I think, April this year. And they have this dinosaur skeleton. And actually, you'll notice there's a lot of dinosaurs. Fukui is actually famous for dinosaurs, in case you are not familiar with Fukui, but they actually have dinosaur like fossils. They find dinosaur fossils. There's like 2 species of dinosaurs that they've been digging up in Fukui. And so Fukui is very dinosaur themed. This is Fukui Station. They have like dinosaur pictures, these animatronic dinosaurs that move and roar outside the station. It's pretty cool. If you've never been there, I recommend. It's a nice place to visit. The venue itself, Fukui University of Technology, is a fairly small university, but it's very nice. This is a view from the venue on the campus. It's a fairly small campus, but it's a nice area with like mountains in the background, some historical buildings on campus. It's a very nice kind of quiet. After Tokyo, it seems quiet and like peaceful area. Okay, just a little bit more about the SIGs, in case you're not familiar too. This is the list of special interest groups from the JALT website, and they have quite a lot. And it's not static. People can start their own special interest groups, and there's a procedure you can follow for applying as a special interest group. And it says here that they're organized by members who share professional interests, and many of them publish their own journals or newsletters and put on their own events. And some of them are fairly specialized, like bilingualism. Some are very broad, like lifelong learning. When you join JALT, if you do join JALT, as a society, you have to, well, you can join one of the special interest groups.
Yeah.
And you can, well, you can, if you want to join more than one, you have to like pay some fee, but for free, with your membership fee, you can join one. I am part of the college and university educators special interest group, but so I know maybe most about that one, but I know a little bit about some of the others. For the college and university educators special interest group, they have their main publication, the On-Q Journal, and they also have a more informal publication, the Q Circular. So there's a lot of opportunities to participate, both to publish, and they are always looking for volunteers to serve on the publication committees and also organize various kinds of events. Just as an example, this is the Mind and Brain Mind and Brain SIG puts out a publication, Mind, Brain, and Education, where they explore neuroscience, how neuroscience connects with teaching. Okay, so that's a little bit brief introduction about the conference. And this was my first time, well, maybe before I go on, this is my first time attending the PanSIG conference. I've attended the main JALT conference a few times, and this was the first time attending the PanSIG, and I found it to be a very pleasant experience. It was much smaller than the main JALT conference, which is very big, and much more informal, and there's a lot more opportunities to just talk casually to people, like even people who usually are very active in the JALT organization, and at the main conference they're usually super busy and they're running around with like schedules and everybody wants their attention. I never had a chance to talk to them then, but at this PanSIG conference I got a chance to talk to several people who I've watched give talks, and I read their stuff, but I actually had time to have a chat with them, which was very nice. Okay, so I'll talk about a few of the talks I've attended that I found interesting. The first plenary was given by Daniel Isbell from the University of Hawaii. And his talk was titled Type and High-Tech Language Testing, Staying Grounded with Language Assessment Fundamentals. So there were a lot of talks that focused on AI, naturally, not surprisingly maybe, but this one had an interesting focus. So language assessment. Ito, I think your mute keeps coming on and off. Okay, so while my focus is not really on, sort of high stakes language assessment, this was a kind of a different topic for me, but there was something interesting that he said. So he focused on sort of fundamental concepts in language assessment, or test assessment, and he mentioned these: practicality, justice, fairness, security, and reliability. And one thing that he said that was interesting, he said that whenever a new technology comes out, the first question we start to ask is, how will this new technology revolutionize language testing, or whatever our language teaching, our area is? But maybe a better question is, how will this technology, or how practical, secure, reliable, fair, and just is it? And in his talk, he gave several kind of case studies examining different questions in language assessment and looking through this frame. Is it practical, secure, reliable, and fair? One example he gave was, for example, using a generative AI to grade an essay, for example. And they did this kind of study. They tried it out. They had a tailored prompt with a rubric to assess an essay, but what they found was that the AI would not always produce the same grade for the same essay. So while it's fast and practical, it's not really reliable. That's kind of their conclusion. So he talked about a few different aspects. One thing that was new for me, this idea of justice and fairness about an language tests, which I guess makes sense, but it's not something I've thought a lot about. And he cited, one of the people he cited was this Anthony Kuhnen, who I guess writes a lot about fairness and justice in language assessment. This is just one example of a paper where he talks about kind of ideas related to this and things to keep in mind. So I'll just leave this here. I'm happy to share my slides also at the end, so that if anybody's curious, they can look things up. But this was kind of a new thing for me. Okay, so some other talks I attended had to do with student reflections. So I teach academic writing and speaking, as some of you know. And the idea of reflection, students reflecting on their experience and on their learning is something that I am really curious about, and I want to incorporate more in my classes. So one of the talks I attended was by these two speakers from Kanda University, and their talk was titled Fostering Reflection, Students' Language Goals, Strategies, and Resources. They've actually published this work already. So if anybody's interested, they can look up the paper. But in this, I mean, they teach kind of a low proficiency students. They teach them academic writing or sort of like academic writing and speaking kind of class, but they implemented this interesting reflection tool based on this Kato and Maynard wheel of language learning, where students assess themselves for different skills, kind of like the speaking, I mean, it's just language related skills. And, they pick things that they want to improve on, and then think about what actions they might take to improve those particular areas. And in this study, they did so they had a kind of had students think about what areas they wanted to improve. Then they had some activities. Then they followed up with more questions, whether students could improve or felt an improvement and what they did. So I thought this was a nice kind of approach to gathering, having students do reflections in a way that, because for me, having students write reflections in English when English is not their first language is time consuming and also like extra work, so that's always, I'm always looking for ways to make it less work, but still impactful. And I thought this was kind of a nice visual approach. Okay, so yeah, this was the study. If anybody's curious, you can look up the study. And actually, if anybody has any, well, I guess we're gonna have a question and answer session afterwards, but if anybody does have any questions while I'm talking, please feel free to ask me. Another kind of talks that I was looking for are talks about collaboration. So as Hiro mentioned, I collaborate with a few of my colleagues on a project. And actually, it's fairly new. We've been collaborating for a couple of years, but we're still figuring out the best way to collaborate. And collaboration among faculty is not something, there's not really like a roadmap for it, So I'm curious to see how other people collaborate on projects. And this talk, it was given by three speakers, and the title was Collaborating on Original Materials for a Self-Access Learning Center. So these three colleagues, they work at a self-access learning center, and actually one of them is a teacher in a class, and some of them work in this self-access center, and they wanted to have like additional materials for students to learn. So it's kind of a specific topic, but I was more interested in hearing about their collaboration. And one thing that they mentioned, oh, and I'm sorry for the typo here, is that in this project, they had a goal of developing materials to help students in their particular, they have a particular need that students had, and they wanted to develop specific materials for those students to address that need. And their approach was for each person to take responsibility for a different area of the project. One person was creating materials for one part of the material, or like they created kind of like a book. You can see it here. One person was creating a second part of the materials, and one person was creating Japanese language kind of counterpart for the materials. So they although they did proofread and give feedback on each other's parts, they kind of each took responsibility for a different part of the project, which I guess is an interesting way to collaborate. You know, whenever you're collaborating, especially if you're producing something like writing or giving a presentation, there's always like, how do you do it? Is each person responsible, or do you all try to write or work together? It's if anybody's done that, it's quite challenging. So yeah, and they seem to get along well, and they could produce their final project without too much trouble. So I guess that's one way to approach collaboration. So that was interesting to hear. I also went to one of the forums. So as I said, the special interest groups, each of them held a forum. They had a time slot for these forums on both days, but the negative downside of it was that in this time slot, like 10 different special interest groups had their forum at the same time, so you could only attend one. So I attended the one from Lifelong Learning SIG, and the forums were basically 3 or 4 speakers, each one talking about something related to a theme for that particular group. In this case, the theme was fostering a sustainable language teaching and learning community. There were 3 speakers, and they all spoke about very different things, but they were all very good speakers. I want to highlight one of the speakers, Louise Ohashi from Gakushin University. And her focus is on called computer-assisted language learning. And she did talk about AI, introducing AI-supported tools and tasks in the language classroom and for self-study. Actually, she's a very good speaker, and I would like to invite her here for a talk. So, let's talk later about it. So because her focus is on computer-assisted language learning, soon after, ChatGPT came out and different AIs came out, she started researching it, and she's already published about it, several studies, mostly looking at language educators' responses to ChatGPT. This one, I think, was a fairly early study, published in 2024. I think she did this like right after ChatGPT came out. Another one, ChatGPT and language learning, also looking at the response. Maybe this was the earlier one. Maybe this was the latest one. Oh, this is worldwide, and this was maybe within Japan. She also published for one of the SIGs, the Mind-Brain SIG, Rethinking Education in the Age of AI. So she talks and writes a lot about this. So I think since we're all learning how to live with AI, she might be a good person to invite. And she talked about various kinds of tools in her talk. Some of them, I haven't heard about. One useful one I learned about, I don't know if you guys are familiar, is called Poe. It's just poe.com. And it's a kind of AI aggregator. So it has access to all the different kinds of AIs. And it is, you can use it in several different ways. You can use it just as a chat bot, similar to ChatGPT. You can also, as an assistant, you can also make your own bots by sort of customizing what you want it to do. So I've been playing around with it, and it's kind of useful. Can you guys see my slides okay? Yes? Is this bar in the way? I'm not quite sure what everybody's seeing.
You're seeing Poe.
What? So because
I can see your slides.
you don't see my slides.
I can.
You can? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I am getting like there's a message in the chat that's okay, you solved the problem. Okay, so everybody's good. And if you missed my slides, I'm happy to share them later. Sorry about that. Okay, and yeah, so I think Louise Ohashi is a really good, she's a great speaker too, and I think she would be a really good person to invite. How are we doing on time? I think I'm gonna wrap up soon. Another interesting talk, the second plenary was given by Yue Suzuki-dan, who's at the University College London. Her focus is on really language acquisition, and the talk was exploring influence of cognitive and socio-psychological factors on second language speech learning. And really her main takeaway was that each learner is different and their individual differences can impact how they learn. Her focus is really on speech learning. And so she talked about a lot of the studies she did about how do people learn sounds? How do people learn to distinguish sounds, both produce and distinguish? Can you improve people's ability to hear sounds they're not, used to in their native language, and also produce the sounds? And I guess it's not something super revolutionary for language teachers, but I found it quite interesting. And she shared her group, her lab developed a website, SLA Speech Tools, where they share several different tools that teachers can use, teaching tools. If you're teaching speaking and you want to have your students practice on these kind of proven methods of improving sound production and reception. And this is one example for pronunciation instruction, but on her website, there's several different tools and activities that you can access and use in your classrooms. And the last talk I want to talk about, maybe it was my favorite one in a way. It was called Why Teach Poetry? And the speaker, Camilo Villanueva, I guess, he talked about how he teaches poetry to language learners. And he gave a few reasons. So he teaches them about poetry. He has them write poetry in different styles. And he has them do this thing called poem explication, which was a new word for me, which is basically reading a poem and writing what you thought about it. Like what did you think it meant, or what kind of impressions did you get as you were reading this poem? And it was so interesting in the talk. He actually gave us a poem. He had us like a very short poem. He had us actually do this, write our thoughts, and then we shared with each other. And it was a really, I'm not a poem expert at all, but it was just so interesting to kind of think about like a new piece of poetry and to hear what somebody else thought about it and where we overlapped and or where we didn't. And I asked him if he had like a answer key, like what's the right interpretation of a poem for the students when they did it in class. And he said, well, I just tell them what I thought about it, but I tell them that that's just one interpretation, which I thought was really nice. And I really want to try this out. I think it would be really good for our speaking class flow, because poems are quite short. You could do this and then you can talk about what you thought about it. He also shared this resource about how to explicate a poem. I guess goes more in depth about this process of poem explication, which was, it's useful. And last, I just want to say that I gave a talk with my colleagues at this conference. We talked about our collaboration and a project we did reflecting on our collaboration. And actually, we got really good feedback for our talk. Many people said that, collaboration is not really discussed too much. And so they were happy to hear about our collaboration. in our experience. So that was encouraging for us to keep going and share what we've done. And next year, the PanSIG conference will be in Chiba. So if anybody's curious about it, it's a really good conference, and I would recommend it. It's very like casual, and you can talk to people. And yeah, so that's my experience with the PanSIG conference. So maybe I'll stop here and we can have some time for questions.